Welcome to First Issues. Tonight on this segment, we're talking the evolution of financial technology, or Fintech, if you will. Just about half a century ago, one of the few ways to send money was through what was called a telegram. Or take our uncles who used to work at the mines in South Africa, whose only platform to send money home was to wait for a colleague to travel to Botswana, which, by the way, was usually at the end of that contract. Back home, the recipients of the money saved it under their mattresses or mud hut rafters. This was considered perfectly normal and highly efficient, but surely you can attest that we've come a long way since then. Today, some of us find that idea of money transfer inconceivable, clearly demonstrating how far financial services and technology have evolved. Over the years, there has been an introduction of modern technology to ease access to financial services such as money transfers, payments, savings, trading, and many others. The crack is, however, in the next 2 years, this very technology may be considered archaic. So the aim tonight is understanding the roots of Fintech so we can better understand where it might go in future. Once we understand the forces that have been driving this change, we're better equipped to know what products and services might succeed over the coming years. To further discuss, we've invited to the program Stencil Technologies founder and Chief Executive Officer, Ogone Mothooagae.
The broad strokes definition of financial technology is business models that aim to use technology or innovation specifically to digitize financial transactions and to a large extent actually change and improve the user experience in financial services value chains, or at least components thereof. So if we home into it a little bit, I think it's safe to still call it an emerging industry. It's an industry that is comprised fundamentally of small startup organizations, and these startup organizations have a mandate, a very clear mandate, to first of all compete with and or disrupt the large financial services, traditional financial services delivery as we have known it. And I think they've achieved phenomenal success given the time that the industry has been around, which is just under maybe about 12 years. So if you take a quick plotting of the numbers, will show you that this industry took prominence from following the financial crunch of 2008. The surface explanation is that the success owes itself to the proliferation and the adoption of internet connectivity, coupled with the army of innovative and creative entrepreneurs that were hell-bent on changing the status quo as far as financial services were concerned. But I'm of the view that while that is true, I'm of the view that there's a case to be made for the role played by the tightening of financial services regulation, which ultimately brought an avalanche of hefty fines to the large financial services sector and the big banks, as you will be aware. And now I think it's common knowledge that Fintech has really now tipped the scale a little bit and eaten at what was previously the market share of the big banks and the big financial services firms. Now, I think from where I sit, it's a very interesting space to look at. There's a lot of moving parts, which I'm hoping we'll get into. And for me, I find it quite exciting to watch.
Maybe at this point, Ogone, you could speak to us from your experience what the ecosystem of Fintech looks like.
The ecosystem is quite broad, right? And there's several ways to look at it. I like to aggregate it to about 6 areas. So there's different subsectors, and these subsectors almost speak to, I'd say, industry or function. Okay, so, and the first one would be something like mobile payments. And the examples of that would be services like PayPal, Apple Pay, and of course, services like e-wallet would also make that list. So they have transformed the way that individuals transact across, particularly across sub-Saharan Africa, which has been quite a needle mover in that sense. The second one that I want to speak to is InsurTech. So InsurTech is fintech within the insurance space. So how do you take insurance products and insurance products and services to the people that need them, particularly the people who either one, didn't have access to insurance products previously because they were not bankable, or secondly, individuals who need the insurance products to actually reach them where they are, and they don't need to make their way to the brick and mortar as we historically had to. The third one that I would want to speak to, and slightly more simplistic, is the budgeting applications. They are slightly more smarter than your traditional spreadsheet that you would use to budget, because they look at your broader budgeting requirements. They look at your net worth. They look at your projections to what you want to be, where you want to be financially when you retire, and that sort of thing. So they can holistically look at your entire financial position and advise you accordingly. We also have the robo-advisors, and as you can tell from the name, so robo-advisors are like asset managers. So algorithm-driven asset managers, based on your earnings, your net worth, your spending patterns, your aspirations, your goals in terms of your financial future. The robo-advisor can advise you where to invest your money and how to invest your money, how to put it in, how to pull it out. And then we have a lot more sophisticated, the blockchain. So the blockchain, through its fundamental framework of digital and smart contracts, has seen the birth of cryptocurrencies. And there's a plethora of cryptocurrencies that you can bring about, like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, whatever the case is. And last but not least, we have the crowdfunding platforms. So crowdfunding platforms are platforms that allow individuals to actually capitalize their projects. So you have an idea for a specific project, or you are a startup that needs to capitalize your business or your business idea. You're able to actually have individuals who have been convinced by that idea to contribute into a pot, and you can start a business. Cryptocurrencies are fintech. They fall into the fintech family. Let me put it this way. So there's a technology called blockchain. Blockchain is a technology that is based on a secure way of keeping records. And of that technology, we have found a way to actually create this ecosystem of transactions that keeps everybody in that ecosystem honest about the transactions that are happening and securely, about the transactions that you're paying me money, I'm paying you money, you're paying someone else. So those transactions are kept centrally. And the blockchain technology of smart contracts is the one that keeps that entire ecosystem honest with itself. So every single block will have something called a hash. Okay, so now a hash is a unique identifier for that singular block. Okay, and we have a hash for the current block detail, and then we have a hash for the previous block detail. As an individual, you will have your private key, which is tied to your username and password. So let's call it your password, so that private key is unique to you and it's secret and private to yourself, right? Then you have a private key, which is maybe your email address, which actually identifies you, but everybody can have it. So a combination of those two, and from the receiver and the sender, is actually what keeps the entire ecosystem honest as well. So not only are we looking at that hash code and the previous and the current, and making sure that that's consistent across all the Bitcoin accounts, but we also want to know that the transaction has been authenticated by the relevant people. And that's really how at a very high level, how cryptocurrency works. And I'm sorry if it's getting a little too technical.
This is a relatively new space that has just emerged, right? Fintech, that is. So I want to know what some of the growing pains and struggles that you've noticed within this industry are.
For me, the pros of being in fintech is, it's an exciting new industry. So it's always good to discover new things as you go along. It's really great to watch from that perspective. I think a lot of the organizations that are at the forefront of the fintech space are actually quite small organizations in relative size to the traditional financial services sector. I think from a cons perspective, I would say it's highly unstructured. It can even come across as somewhat haphazard in the way that it's being carried out. It's very cowboy, and we're doing it in the garage type of attitude, even for the most successful fintech exchange and that sort of thing. So, which might be exciting for some people, by the way. And yeah, I think if you're the kind of person that likes the traditional job security of a large organization, you might find it slightly disconcerting.
In your first answer, you spoke about this is an industry that has a whole lot of moving parts. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. So where do you see the future of fintech? What are some of the products that we might be seeing come through, and the sort of problems that they might be trying to solve?
I see a future where fintech services and the fintech startups and organizations sit at the transacting part of the value chain. And this is now, when you sit at the transacting part of the value chain, you're actually sitting at a point where consumers make decisions. You're sitting at a point where customers walk in the door, if you like. And because of that, you can use that data to do a whole host of other things to understand the consumer and actually draw data from that, draw some intelligence from that data, and start to perhaps draw some value out of it, which is quite brilliant, and which is part of the reason fintechs have this exponential growth rate as compared to traditional organizations. Again, speaking to the future, if you look at the change and the transition of fintech from when it started in the middle 2000s and to where it sits now, and the fact that we are currently having higher learning institutions that are training financial graduates who are coming out without any knowledge of fintech, I find that as an extreme disservice, that we are not training our young people for jobs of the future in that sense. So I spoke earlier about robo advisors. I spoke about digital payments. So if you're currently studying to be an asset manager, and as an industry, we're currently honing algorithms that you could never beat in terms of advising clients from an asset management perspective. When you graduate in 5 years' time, you'll be immediately relevant. So I think it's important that we actually don't continue just down the path of the sort of training that we used to do as educational institutions, but actually look at skills of the future and say, how do we prepare our young people to compete meaningfully and participate in the future ecosystem.
This program was brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?